And hello, folks. We are back again with a podcast for all seasons. I'm Josh Mundy, and with me today is my co-host Eric Joseph. Today, we're going to be doing season 4, episode 4. We're going to be talking about our respective DCEU wish lists, and me and Eric are kind of do a little back and forth as regards to what we want to see, what we hope to see, and we're going to do a little bit of talk in regards to some of the announcements that have been coming up. We're not going to go crazy about that because there's a lot of news. Not a lot of it is all solid news. Some of it's speculation, some of it's rumor mongering. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we know so far, and then go from there into the topic proper. So as always, I'm going to let my co-host start us off. Eric, what's going on? Introduce yourself, and why don't you start off on topic numero uno?
Hi, Josh, and hi to all of our listeners. Yes, we are talking DCEU wish lists, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But with some news breaking this week, and it's actually a decent segue into it, we had the technically not an announcement, more so just something via the respectable Hollywood trades and such. But yeah, we're getting a Joker origin movie that will start another actor that's not Jared Leto, who is younger, and it is not taking place in the DC extended universe. It's going to take place in the early 80s and be more comparable to films such as The Taxi Driver. Um, it There's really nothing we can't say that hasn't been said by a myriad of fans on Twitter, because reaction to this has mostly been negative. I mean, it's going to be written and directed by Todd Phillips of the Hangover trilogy and produced by Martin Scorsese. So with those men on board, you get the feeling, yes, this movie is going to happen. I don't think Scorsese is going to put his name on a movie that's going to get shit canned. Something we've known WB to do a lot of in the past 30 years or whatever with various DC related projects, because they don't all come to screen, which, part of the reason we're going to do our wish lists in a moment. But yeah, it's going to be starting a new banner of films that are going to be more filmmaker driven and can stand alone outside the DCU. Now, I'm hoping they call this banner Elseworlds, because that would just be awesome, and it would really create a rapport with the comic book fans, even though we're not expecting everything to be based on a comic. But recently we heard there was chatter, Mark Millar likes to hype up his own work. Without him, Kick Ass would have never gotten a film sequel. It was just him saying, yeah, there's going to be a Kick Ass too. But he said there were talks of a Red Sun movie happening, and while we fully expect that to happen in animation before it would ever happen in live action, we know Henry Cavill has said that's one of his favorite Superman comics, and I think he's even said before that he'd be down for a movie. So that would, if Cavill wanted to do a Red Sun movie under an Elseworlds banner, I we really can't complain, because it would probably make for a good film. But yeah, this Joker movie, as fans of this show know, I've cosplayed as the Joker on a few occasions. He's easily my favorite villain in all of fiction. But do we need a spin-off film, especially when there's going to be much more of the Jared Leto Joker in the well, not the new year, the coming years? And really, it's it's the thing of having the Joker, giving him a definitive origin story. Yeah, they did it in Batman '89. It was more so a nod to they didn't do the whole Red Hood thing, but they had, he's a gangster, he falls into a vat of acid. They gave him a name in Jack Napier, playing on, the moniker Jackanapes. But really, while we've had comic books such as The Killing Joke and Lovers and Madmen, which did give the Joker this backstory, The Killing Joke even stressed his background's multiple choice, and fans surmise that either the Joker lies about his history, or he's so far gone he can't rightly remember it. And Lovers and Madmen, originally debuting in the pages of Batman Confidential, a title that Josh and I both read on a regular basis while it was going on. Technically, I think that existed outside DC continuity. And even so, that was pre New 52, so it wouldn't be canonical anymore, regardless. But to give the Joker a definitive origin story, a lot of fans, and I kind of agree, it ruins his mystique. And mystique was something that Christopher Nolan really played up with Heath Ledger's Joker. He never gave him a defined origin, and when he told of his background, he was just lying to play on the emotions of whomever he was sharing the scene with. And while we can't rule out this being a good movie, it could very well be. It just feels funny, especially with no Batman involved, you know? Because the Batman is so closely tied to the Joker's origin. Now we see Gotham's going a bit a different route, but Gotham's pretty much a reimagining anyway. But still, Bruce Wayne's been there throughout the whole thing. So I don't know how they're going to do this. They say it's going to be based on no previously existing material. So we're going to have to wait and see. But I'm guessing if they're getting going on it now, I'd say we'd probably see it by 2020, but I don't. My feelings are very indifferent. But as any Joker fan, you've got to be curious, and yeah, I'm going to be seeing it in the theater. How about you, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, this situation is really bizarre, and I think that one thing that's driving fans on both sides of either the Marvel fanboyism is kind of like see what disarray the house of DC is in, and then DC fanboys are kind of like, I mean, some of them are of the mind that, oh, the more the merrier, like, oh, more content is better, and then some are like me and you, which it's like, okay, I'm excited about some ideas. I'm excited about the idea of a Red Sun Superman. I'm excited about the idea of a Joker standalone movie, but there are things that make me question, the quality of this, or question, the intent behind this, and question even maybe why it's happening in general.
Yeah, there's one point I forgot to make. It's probably not going to be nearly as bad, but we can't help that this idea was cooked up by execs who just plain wanted a Joker movie and maybe landed the right filmmakers, but I'm kind of getting a Catwoman vibe from this, aren't you?
I mean, not so much. I mean, the thing is, I think that if we look at comic book creators and we look at people who have made some of the better, dark, gritty, crime-based comic book tales, my mind comes to Brian Azzarello naturally, and we've got some really good Joker stuff from Azzarello. And this kind of seemed to me as if we're going to have the guy who made The Departed, or at least was involved in The Departed, Martin Scorsese. If we're going to have him involved in a Joker film, like, this could be a really dark, gritty, realistic. I mean, for example, a lot of people people feel one way or the other about it. And what I was going to say is, some people think that Nolan damaged the Batman films, but because by setting them in a grounded reality, that the fantastical comic elements that people want and expect to see now seem gauche. And then on the other hand, people are like, well, yeah, but that movie won Oscars and is respected as one of the better comic book films of all time. It was nominated for an Oscar, like The Dark Knight. And even if it didn't necessarily win an Oscar, the fact that it was even in contention as a real contender is an indication that that movie is of the highest caliber. You can kind of go either way on that argument, but what that makes me think of this Joker film is, I mean, granted, The Hangover were comedies, they're well-made movies, and with Scorsese's involvement, I'm thinking that they're going to do a kind of frightening, deadly, gritty, urban, Gotham gangster take on the Joker, is my guess, if and when this movie comes to actual fruition. So it could be a phenomenal film. it's just again, it's how does this tie into the DC universe proper? And it sounds like it isn't going to tie into the DC universe proper, which is kind of part of the reason that we're having the conversation that we're having today. I'm 100% with you on the Elseworlds thing. I mean, the idea of an Elseworlds imprint in the DC, WB's DC movies would be spectacular, because not only you're playing incredible fan service to the actual comic book readers, but okay, let's say you do get a Feige-esque Helmer behind all of the proper DCEU movies that are cinematically tied to one another. Okay, you can make maybe, let's say, 6 movies every few years, 6 movies over the course of two or 3 years, which is kind of what we're on par for ish, close, not completely, but every few years. But you give out the properties to these other people who have ideas for something like a Superman Red Sun. You don't necessarily have to have the same cast. You don't necessarily have to have Cavill as Superman. I can't imagine that his actual scheduling would allow for him to be, in a couple movies in a year that are of that scope. But the question becomes, is, would it make for these really good movies? And the answer could be very, very likely. I mean, obviously, if we saw something like a Gotham by Gaslight movie, like a live action movie, it's coming out in animated, but if we saw that in live action, it could be really, really an interesting take on Batman. If we saw something like a Superman Red Sun, it would be an interesting take on Batman. It's also an interesting take on Wonder Woman and Green Lantern and Batman and a few other characters as well. And that, so you, I don't know, you get yourself into dicey territory, because you're basically having to cast these iconic characters over and over and over again. It would be very confusing to the population as a whole. As we know, most moviegoers don't read comic books. I believe what do you say? The percentage was something along the lines of like 10% of all moviegoers actually read comic books.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if only 10% of all moviegoers are reading comic books, then they're not going to know, that this is tied into a thing. Now they might do their Google search and find out about it, but at the same time, they're not necessarily going to be as excited as a comic book reader is going to be. I mean, I don't know. So I could say more about it. Like I said, it's not really a part of our topic proper, so we won't go on it about it too much. But it does concern me. I mean, it seems as though Warner Brothers just doesn't have, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like they have a good scope on what their vision is. It seems as though they don't quite know what it is all they want to do just yet in terms of the grand scheme of things. And we can get into that a little bit more as we talk about the topic proper. So what we're going to move on, and Eric, we are going to talk about respective DCEU wish lists. What movies do we want to see? These can be a combination of movies that we're concerned may not happen, movies that we think are going to happen, or simply movies that we would hope to see in this universe. So why don't you start us off on that, and let us know what you're looking forward to, hopefully.
Okay, and before I kick things off, I'm going to preface by saying DC movies that have actual release dates and we know are coming. Beyond Justice League, we have Aquaman in December 2018. We have Shazam, I believe, April 2019. Wonder Woman 2 in December 2019. Now, Forbes says that Flashpoint is probably arriving sometime in 2020. And we just recently learned that the studio is fast tracking Suicide Squad 2. So maybe we'll get a summer 2019 release date if indeed they start rolling cameras sometime next year. And Batgirl, we fully expect to happen because it's Joss Whedon directing. I don't think there's any way they're going to let that fall through. And of course, Batman himself is going to be a high priority to the studio. We just don't know where that's going to fall, and there's a lot of, uncertainty and speculation surrounding that project. But where I'm going to start personally, and the reason some of these movies we're going to discuss have been publicly discussed by Warner Brothers or other Hollywood trades. Some are just ones we want to see based on DC properties. But as we know, there's a plethora of films that have been talked about. And as we said, WB is no stranger to shit canning scripts. So, in all realism, we're only expecting a fraction of these movies that fans are compiling into memes to actually see the light of day. Let's not forget Superman Lives and Justice League Mortal had cameras damn near ready to roll before they were scrapped. So don't get your hopes up on too many things. But first on my list, Nightwing. It's 2017. We're overdue for a Nightwing movie. Dick Grayson has really been the only Robin we've seen in live action, but he hasn't quite made the transition from sidekick to A-lister in film yet. I mean, it's happened in animation, obviously, various times, but I mean, originally they were supposed to have a Nightwing spin-off movie after Batman and Robin starring Chris O'Donnell, but due to that film flopping, they canned that, along with Batman Unchained, which word on the street is that was going to introduce Tim Drake as the new Robin, and Batgirl wasn't even part of that movie, thankfully. I love Batgirl, but not the Batgirl that Joel Schumacher introduced. Just as a side note there, but I love Nightwing. While Damian Wayne is my favorite Robin, Nightwing is where I like that's the guys I like best for Dick Grayson, and I've been wanting to see this forever. I think that the Dick Grayson we're going to get in the Titans live action series is going to be Robin. It's not to step on the toes of what Chris McKay's doing, but this is another hit WB could have on their hands, and obviously they have Batman fever. That's why they're doing all these Batman spin-offs. But it has that appeal of bringing moviegoers into the universe of Gotham City again. Somewhat of a similar tone, but maybe a little more lighthearted because of who Dick Grayson is as a character. But Chris McKay has said, I think we addressed this in our San Diego Comic Con episode. It was not one of the movies they listed off in Hall H as coming, and Chris McKay, who, by the way, directed the Lego Batman movie, so hopefully that gives him some credence as to this movie seeing the light of day. But he said the reason they didn't announce it there was because he's taking this movie and he wants to make it the best possible, and he's not going to be nailed down to any specific date, like saying, oh, this is when the Nightwing movie is coming, but we don't even have a script yet. So I can at least respect him as a filmmaker for just saying, hey, I want to get the Nightwing movie right, and then we'll announce a date. But on the same token, hey, let's start casting for it. Let's start getting people on that script. Let's really get the ball rolling, because at least maybe we don't know if this is going to come before or after the Batman, so we could see Nightwing introduced in a movie before then, like maybe Batgirl, because we know Barbara and Dick have their own romance going off and on in the comics and animation. But Nightwing is a character that's on my personal cosplay wish list. I might dress up as him in the next year or two, but a lot of people agree this is one of the characters we absolutely need in live action. And not to take any attention off the other movies, because we've got a few more. We each have 3 on our respective wish list here. So before you give your firsts on your wish list, what do you think about this Nightwing movie? Do you want to see it, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's time. I mean, I just wish that they would have maybe more organically brought in the Nightwing character, I mean, really, the only thing that we've seen even close to that was, like you mentioned, O'Donnell in actually Batman and Robin was the closest we actually saw to Nightwing, which is sad because, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, as far as the bad things about the Batman Forever and the Batman and Robin, one of the things that wasn't absolutely horrible was basically the Robin and Nightwing costumes that he wore in those movies. Sans nipples, of course, they would have been a lot better. But we got to see basically a similar version to what we've seen in the comics in the last few years. In the movies, we've got to see a red and black and a blue and black version of what essentially is the Nightwing costume in both Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. But
Well, the one in Forever was more so, I think, a nod to Tim Drake.
Right. That was definitely closer to a nod in the Tim Drake. But in Batman Forever, we kind of got to see both the red and the blue. Essentially Nightwing with the V coming down from the shoulders to the middle of the chest, and and we did get to see a pretty decent Robin costume, but I don't feel like we've organically got the move to something like Nightwing. And outside of the comic books, Nightwing isn't a known character really. I mean, it's not like he doesn't have the pop culture awareness that a Robin has, obviously, and he doesn't have the pop culture awareness that even like an Aquaman has. Now, I mean, I'd say that he probably has more pop culture cred than, say, Cyborg. But then, Cyborg at the very least has been introduced in an animated fashion to a modern audience somewhat recently. And so, people who are in their younger 20s, and maybe even younger than that, they know that character Cyborg and they know Robin, but they don't really know Nightwing. And we haven't really got, him being, he hasn't really delved into the greater social consciousness. So I think that without somehow organically bringing him into the DCU and introducing him, if even in backstory in say The Batman or something like that, I don't know how well that movie would do as a standalone. I just don't see how I don't see how successful it would be, because it's essentially Batman light, right? It's Batman, but it's not Batman. It's got some Batman villains, but it's not Batman. Maybe it has characters like a Batgirl in it, or maybe it has characters from the greater universe as a whole. But I think, to a point, it'll feel like Gotham feels to some people. It's like, yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's set in this universe. But if you're going to give me Batman, just give me Batman. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of my take on it. And I like the Nightwing character a lot. So it's just unfortunate that I feel as though that's kind of the reality of it. Yeah, is it his time? Does he deserve it? Absolutely. But that now we're getting into the territory of fairness, which doesn't ever come across my thought process when it comes to why things happen the way that they do, especially in terms of movies or something like that. So, I just don't know about Nightwing. I think I'm kind of on the fence about whether I really, really want to see it, because one thing I don't want to see is I don't want to see any of DC's properties really get out there and fail. I don't want that to happen. So if they did something like a Catwoman and it just came out there and it was an abysmal failure, it would be very disappointing. And all it's going to do is it's going to set that character back years and years and years. Anyway, okay. So as far as mine, I'll say my first one is going to have to be Man of Steel 2. I think that a lot of people suspected Man of Steel 2 would have already happened by now. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be Man of Steel 2, although, we've broken away from some of the naming conventions recently that people expected to see in movies. I mean, I don't know that I ever 15 years ago would have suspected that there was going to be a superhero movie called Man of Steel. We got Batman Begins, which was a very awkward title, but then we got The Dark Knight, which is one of his monikers, and then we got The Dark Knight Rises as the sequel to that one. With Man of Steel, one of Superman's monikers, he's got several, but none of them are as popular as the Man of Steel. You know, no one really knows the Man of Tomorrow, and it would be kind of an awkward name for a sequel to Man of Steel. But yeah, well, a lot of us thought that it was going to happen already, and you know, a lot of us thought that we were going to get Man of Steel 2, inevitably what developed into Batman versus Superman, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, as it were. And as far as strange naming conventions are concerned, that entire title must be mentioned. But I think that that was kind of an odd choice narratively to go. I mean, we've talked about it at length in terms of mine and Eric's enjoyment of that movie, so it doesn't need to be mentioned again. We both liked that film and didn't give it nearly as bad of a buzz as everyone else seemed to give it in the kind of comic book movie review business. But at the same time, one of the things that disappointed both myself and I think I can speak for Eric, at least to a point, was the fact that it was kind of a squash for Superman. And I think that looks bad for not only the brand of Superman, but you take this character who can literally survive a nuclear blast, but you introduce him to something that weakens him slightly, and he gets beat up by essentially a guy in a mechanized suit, even if that guy is Batman. You know, it'd be one thing if you know, they played on the whole oh well, the reason he really loses is not because he would lose that fight, it's because he's unwilling to just outright murder Batman, which is true. And they're playing in the narrative playground of a Batman who was potentially willing to murder Superman. Okay, so you're changing the math a little bit, but I think that kind of did a disservice. But yeah, as far as Man of Steel 2 is concerned, it would be nice to get a movie that is predominantly Superman centric, one that concentrates on him, one that moves that movie forward, and introduce a villain that is someone that we haven't seen before. And I mean, for God's sakes, give us Brainiac already or something. I mean, Now I do think that you kind of get into the same territory that you get into with some of the Marvel films, which is, you know, hey, why is it Captain America calling his good buddy Tony Stark Iron Man when Hydra is about to take over the entire world and Captain America too? Yeah, you can have all those arguments and whatnot, but that's just what's going to happen in a movie that's not an Avengers style or a Justice League style event where you're bringing the entire team together. Yeah, bring in Brainiac. You know, I don't know the best way to do it. I'm not a screenplay writer, but I mean, there's plenty of well to go to as far as bringing in the Brainiac character. There's several variations of him. I'd like to see something similar to what we got in the animated film of which name I'm forgetting. Eric, you can assist me with that one, where we had Brainiac come in and actually.
Well, if you're not referring to the immortal classic that was Brainiac Attacks, I think you're talking about Superman Unbound. Was it the one based on the Jeff Johns and Gary Frank?
Yes, that is correct. It was Superman Unbound. So, yeah, I think that if you bring in the character like that, it could be an interesting story. You make him humanoid. They could make him robotic, but then, you know, that Superman just tears right through him. He's had several incarnations. You could even make him a bigger bad than he initially appears to be. You make him come up. You make him, you know, be his robotic version, and then you realize that it's just essentially a drone for eventually a Brainiac that maybe is in another Justice League movie or something like that. But they could do lots of things. But Superman, he come on, he's always been the head of the DC universe. I know that's kind of went the way of Batman. Inevitably, it was always bound to happen. Superman's always been such an old-fashioned character, but so is Captain America, and it doesn't keep them from bringing him into the modern age. I think that they need to get that Man of Steel movie sequelized as soon as possible. But what are your thoughts on that, Eric?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. For me, Man of Steel is my second favorite DCEU movie, first being Wonder Woman. But Man of Steel was kind of Superman's equivalent of Batman Begins. And it'll just be a shame if this Superman, played by Henry Cavill, never gets his Dark Knight, so to speak. Because no matter what you want to say, we all know Man of Steel didn't quite meet the critical and financial expectations Warner Brothers set for it. So, what was it, a month after it debuted in theaters, they announced the sequel was coming at San Diego Comic-Con that year and that Batman was in it. And not only that, but Batman pretty much hijacked the damn movie, especially if you're going by the theatrical cut. Yes, it followed the events of Man of Steel. It had Lex Luthor, but it was not Man of Steel 2. And we really need just that solo Superman film that no other DC characters cameo in, and let him have his own movie. And it's not just the fact that yes, we need Brainiac, and maybe Brainiac should be the villain of this movie. But aside from we finally got Naked Doomsday in a movie, and I know we'll get the comments. Well, when they changed Zod over, he wasn't wearing any shorts, so it only makes sense. Doomsday had no shorts. Yeah, then why didn't Doomsday, to be proportionate, just have like this 3-foot long, 80-pound swinging Dawn when he was jumping around the city? People said the same thing about the Thing and the Fantastic Four reboot. It's like, he's got no PP. But anyway, yeah, all we've really seen is Lex Luthor and Zod in movies, and hopefully we never see an updated version of Nuclear Man or something from the Quest for Peace. But yeah, we need Brainiac. We need Mongol or something else. And not to get ahead of me, because there's a certain character I'm going to mention at the end of this podcast. But I firmly believe Superman has one of the best rogues galleries in comics. We've seen it exploited in Superman the Animated Series, the latter years of Smallville, which did give us Brainiac as best they could on their budget. And we're really seeing it on Supergirl, but it needs to happen in the movies. We need that full-on version of Brainiac with the green skin. The suit Gary Frank came up with is so badass that it'd be cool to see that on film. And we really need to make Man of Steel 2 a priority, because other than hearing that, I think Henry Cavill's producing and they're circling Matt Vaughn as a director, who would be a good choice knowing what he did with X-Men First Class and the first Kick-Ass. And I believe he did Kingsman: The Secret Service, which I haven't seen, but I hear a lot of good things about, so I need to put that on the list of view
as soon as possible. That movie is crazy.
But yeah, that's the kind of person you think you would need to make a good Superman movie. So just get it done, WB. The world always needs Superman, no matter how corny people think it is. But Superman, like Captain America, just make him relevant for a modern audience. Writers in comics can do it. He's not saying gee whiz in the current runs of Action Comics and Superman, which are always on my must reads for Rebirth. I love Action Comics. But anyway, that's kind of a discussion for another day. Second on my list, funnily enough, you're going to see a theme here with mine, but second is Gotham City Sirens, which, yeah, there was some word coming down this week with not only this Joker origin movie, but they're making Joker and Harley Quinn a priority, whatever that movie may be called. And they're circling the filmmakers from Crazy Stupid Love to do that. And it would be arriving after Suicide Squad 2, thus hinting that we'd be seeing Margot Robbie and Jared Leto in Suicide Squad 2. But Gotham City Sirens, we, excuse me, heard of before there was any notion of Joker and Harley Quinn movie, and like some of the other characters we're giving credence to here, it would also star Catwoman and Poison Ivy, two other characters that deserve their rightful place in the DCEU beside Harley Quinn. And the only thing that really makes me nervous, I don't want to see David Ayer giving my beloved Catwoman a lot of tattoos or a grill. But this is one I'm personally very excited to see. And David Ayer has hinted Black Mask would be the villain, which that's another character we're due for on film. And I'm very excited to see all these characters together. The tracking board said Joker and Harley Quinn was bumping Gotham City Sirens from the list. Someone else came out with a report the other night. I can't remember offhand who it is. I think it was Forbes saying no, Gotham City Sirens will still happen at some point. Ayer's attached, but again, this is one just knowing WB's history and how they're already prioritizing several films over it. I can't help but think this is in that iffy area, and as much as I love Harley, and I'm actually wearing a Margot Robbie Harley Quinn shirt as we broadcast this show, Catwoman is my favorite female character, and I still haven't seen my Catwoman in live action, as it were, because the one in the '60s was kind of its own thing, though great. Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, which was a fantastic portrayal and performance, was Tim Burton's reimagining of Selina Kyle. So it wasn't quite character-wise what we would expect. We're not even going to really go into the disgrace that the Halle Berry movie was, because that wasn't even Selina Kyle. And that's what guys in a boardroom thought Catwoman should be. She has cat powers, right? No, she doesn't. She is a damn jewel thief. That's what she is. She's not good. She's not evil. She's Selina Kyle. That's what she is. Character-wise, I think Anne Hathaway's version in The Dark Knight Rises was kind of close to what we've seen in the comic books for the past few decades. That ambiguous character, she's a jewel thief. She ultimately ended up siding with Batman. Costume-wise, it's not what I wanted. She was kind of more a high-tech Julie Newmar. And I want that cat suit that I think was introduced by Darwin Cook, but we've seen him prominently in Hush and everything since. Everyone who reads comics knows what I'm talking about. It's the zip-up cat suit with the tight cowl and the goggles. That's what I want to see from her next outing. And yes, Poison Ivy, they've kind of redeemed her. I love what Maggie Gehod does on Gotham, but she's still developing that personality, kind of a naivete to the character. I don't think Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy was bad per se. She was just in the wrong movie. I don't think she really did anything wrong as an actress, though there were some weird costuming choices. But this is really a character we need to bring into the DCEU properly. And I don't know, I'll be really brokenhearted if Gotham City Sirens doesn't hit theaters. I know that the Gotham City Sirens brand isn't maybe as necessarily close to your heart, Josh, but I know you also have a respect for these characters. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, obviously Catwoman is an inordinately popular character. And, I guess it depends, which version of, if we're talking about Harley, Catwoman, and Poison Ivy as the traditional, Gotham City Sirens, then, obviously with Margot Robbie's Harley being as popular as it is right now, Harley, the character itself, is ridiculously popular right now in comic books and whatnot, but she's kind of crossed over into that, socio-cultural thing that has made her more popular to the social consciousness as a whole. I think that it would be prime time. Now, obviously, everyone knows the Catwoman character is kind of up there with Batman and Robin in terms of being well known. But you mentioned something that she does not have cat powers. Is that what you're saying? Catwoman does not have cat powers. I'm confused.
I don't know. All those comic books I've read, yeah, I don't know.
So yeah, no, Catwoman does not have cat powers. Hopefully, this movie is not made in the boardroom like that horrible Halle Berry travesty. Um, it does kind of show you what happens when studios decide to like basically completely get involved in movie making. Um, but no, I mean if I in my ideal Gotham City Sirens movie, which I mean it sounds like it's being replaced by the Joker and Harley movie. But if it potentially happens, I mean, first things first, you've got a few things going for you. A, people are really pushing the whole girl power movement, especially with regards to superhero movies. We're seeing the success of Wonder Woman. I believe as of I want to say it was last weekend. Um, it became the most successful domestic release for a superhero movie. I believe it might be a superhero origin movie.
Origin.
Nonetheless,
I think you still got stuff like the Avengers and Dark.
right. I mean, it is a ridiculously impressive
Yeah, it crossed
405.
domestic and 800 worldwide. So
Yeah, it just crossed 405 in its domestic, and it's 801 currently standing in its worldwide. So I mean, it's inordinately successful. We imagine its sequel will probably be even more successful, which tends to happen in these things. It happened with Iron Man, it happened with Guardians of the Galaxy, it's happened with I guess you could call Batman versus Superman a sequel to Man of Steel theoretically. There's just it's been a standard fare that the movies will do even better in their sequel. That's not always the case, but yeah, so they're pushing really the girl power element in films, with Margot Robbie's character in Suicide Squad being very popular amongst women and guys. It would make sense to, I mean, I don't know, I'll go see a movie with three absolute sex pots on screen. Like, I'll go see that film. But also, you make it like a really fun crime movie. You maybe bring in some other characters. You bring in some other characters from that universe. Maybe they're stealing from another villain. Maybe they are. You don't have to make it the Suicide Squad where it's potentially some huge cataclysmic event because of some magical enchantress or whatever. But no, you make it a more fun, crazy. You give us a lot of cool action set pieces. You give us you give each character their place to shine, and I think the movie could do well. Yeah, it's not one that I'm like chomping at the bit for, but I could see how and why it would be successful for sure. So as far as my next movie is actually going to be one that is confirmed, but that is not necessarily something that everyone's chomping at the bit for, to use the term that I just used, which would be the Shazam movie. Now, since me and Eric kind of decided that we're going to kind of talk about ones that don't have definitive release dates, I'm going to go with the Black Adam movie. So that one definitely, Shazam I want to see, and I really hope it gets made. I mean, as it stands right now, the fact that it has a release date is a pretty good indication that it's going to get made. But as Eric mentioned earlier, Warner Brothers has a bad penchant for, getting things even close to production, in active production, and then just cutting it off at its feet. So, yeah, the Black Adam movie is an interesting thing because it was mentioned a long time ago. How far ago was it mentioned, Eric? I mean, it's been a couple years now, I believe.
well, Dwayne Johnson was first cast, I think, back in 2014, and then it wasn't really said until quite recently that no, he's not in the Shazam movie. Black Adam is getting his own movie.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, when we had a character like Black Adam, which we realized that that's not a character that's well known to the greater culture as a whole. He's been in a few of the animated movies, and so there maybe is a little bit amongst younger audiences who might have seen him in animation or him in movies. They might understand why the Black Adam character is what he is. Um, I mean, for those in our audience who aren't extraordinarily familiar with the Black Adam character, he basically is the same character as Captain Marvel, aka Shazam from the DC, in that he has the power of I believe it's seven gods, and the reason that Black Adam is in his case they are I believe Egyptian gods, and one of the reasons that he is such an absolute threat as a villain is he essentially has the power of a Captain Marvel and or a Shazam or closer to almost a Superman level, with none of the weaknesses. So he's more OP than Wonder Woman, right? None of the weaknesses of Superman from Kryptonite, none of the weaknesses of Wonder Woman, just not being as invulnerable, and completely evil, completely evil. So he's a phenomenal villain. But his origin story is in and of itself extraordinarily interesting, and they've written the character borderline between being very, very evil, like destroy the world evil, to just being in contention with Captain Marvel Shazam because he believes that he should be the chosen one, kind of with these powers. And then in more recent years, they've almost written him like an anti-hero. Now I don't know what kind of direction they're going to go in if and when we actually see this Shazam, or rather this Black Adam movie when it eventually comes to light. But I think that for the purposes of, how do you stop this character without outright killing him? And then, what's the point of having had someone like The Rock cast on this character for now 3 years? And by the time we actually see that movie, hell, it could be 3 years later. He's been set to play this character for 6 years, and then to kill him would be ridiculous. So how do you mitigate the damage of a character who's that powerful without killing him outright? And the only question would be that maybe he is more of an anti-hero and he just comes to blows with the good guys because he's got a different perspective than they do on what's right and wrong. That's kind of the more anti-hero perspective that they've taken recently. So that's in my one. My next list on the wish list. What do you think, Eric? I mean, do you think that movie's going to come to light? Is it a character that you care about? Is it a character that you want to see on the screen?
Well, I've known for a long time that you really love Black Adam, so it doesn't surprise me it made your list. And I think it stands a good chance of getting made, but the question is it going to make money? Because I think WB is banking solely on Dwayne Johnson's star power, which, as we know, isn't always a guarantee, no matter how highly of a paid actor he is. Uh, it's the fact that Black Adam is relatively unknown to mainstream moviegoers, and it's the slippery slope this is on is what time period they want to set it in, since it's not going to be involved with Shazam. At least these characters aren't meeting yet. But the fact of the matter is if you set it, thousands of years ago, you risk retreading yet another movie Dwayne Johnson was in, The Scorpion King,
Yeah,
which
yeah, for sure.
could be a lot like, except this time he's probably not going to have a mullet. But but you could set it in modern times somewhat, or some other time period that he is basically the ruler of Kahndaq, and with Dwayne Johnson hinting at more of an anti-hero portrayal, that would make sense because to the people of Kahndaq, he's not seen in the light that he is to the superhero community or to outside nations. He'll do whatever it takes for his people, which is why I also recommend, and I've recommended to you, Josh, to check out the current run of Injustice 2 comics, because there was a one-off issue that was basically centered. I think it was number 6, but don't quote me on it. And we're talking the print issues here, not the digital chapters. That was a lot to do with Black Adam and Supergirl, and it was just a fantastic issue if you like the character of Black Adam. So look for that at your local comic shops if you can. But I just don't know how they're going to pull it off. And I mean, I'd see a Black Adam movie, and as we know, there have been rumors that he would be the villain in a possible Man of Steel too, which I don't think is the right choice because that's a character that needs to fight Shazam. And if he's fighting Superman, which is believable because of their power levels, it's you're again just playing off Dwayne Johnson's star power, and Superman needs a brainiac, not a Black Adam. But I think we pretty much said what we can about Black Adam, at least at this point. My final entry on the list, and again, you're going to notice running theme here, Batman Beyond. Yes, I'm kind of sticking to the Batman theme as Warner Brothers themselves are, but that's another one I really want in live action. It almost happened in the space occupying Batman and Robin and Batman Begins, but it was one of those movies that fell through, like Batman Year One and so on. And to date, we've really seen only Bruce Wayne as Batman on film, and I would like for that to change at some point. It looks like we'll probably see Thomas Wayne in the Flashpoint movie, which will be cool. But just imagine how cool Batman Beyond in live action will be. There are rumors that WB was kicking around the idea after The Dark Knight Rises when they were thinking, where do we take the Batman franchise next? But ultimately, we got Batman versus Superman. And if Batman Beyond happens, it's not going to be until after Matt Reeves has a chance to tell whatever story or stories he wants to. But I wanted to get there, and everyone has the same thought. Michael Keaton as old Bruce Wayne, because how awesome would that be? Doesn't even necessarily have to connect to the Burton movies, but it's just there as the fan service. But yeah, just futuristic Gotham. It'd be a fresh way to do Batman for mainstream audiences. You have a completely different rogues gallery to mine. You've got Ink, Blight, Shriek, Spellbinder, just these other characters. Granted, we did have Return of the Joker as an animated movie, but let's hope that WB doesn't fall back on that because we know they have Joker fever. But yeah, just so many other characters to exploit. Hey, if they wanted to do a classic Batman villain, just revisit that Mr. Freeze plot of him just being that head in the future, and that was a character it made sense for Terry to fight. That would actually be cool to see in live action. But yeah, just to see the whole Neo Gotham in the future, there's so much potential for a movie like this. And anytime someone mentions Batman Beyond, it's sure lived on as the comics and has even become integrated into DC continuity proper, with Terry having his own comic now that's not just a continuation of the animated series, as so many of them have been. But really, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But anytime Batman Beyond comes up as a mention, or I write an article having to do with Batman Beyond, it catches fire, and understandably so, because so many people have a love for that brand that they want to see it come back. I'm surprised they haven't even revisited it as an animated movie yet, because I know with Bruce Timm, revisiting certain things of his, like Batman and Harley Quinn was pretty much a revisitation of the new Batman adventures and style and such. It's just it's overdue for a Terry McGinnis comeback in some fashion outside of comics, and hopefully we see this movie before we're in adult diapers, which is probably, I don't know, that's like 6 months from now. You never know when continents will hit you, but still, you know what I mean. Give me a damn Batman Beyond movie. Come on, what do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a huge fan of the Batman Beyond character since he was created, and that being the case, I don't know how well it would play out in live action. I mean, the concern that I have is we've already got a few things that that some of the fan base doesn't love overall about the DCEU. One is that there seems to be this disconnect between what is kind of expected from people in terms of, okay, you're going to have the next film, and then you're going to have the next film, and then you'll have a team up film, because everyone expects them to follow kind of the Marvel formula, right? So there's this disconnect between the expectation of what we're going to get and what it seems like we are actually getting. That is kind of why something like a Black Adam film might come off as a little bizarre if it does take place in the past, although it worked for Wonder Woman. It might come off as a little bizarre that we then, without really having established this universe's Batman, really, I mean, that's assuming that the Batman Beyond movie is tied to the DCEU proper. It doesn't have to be necessarily, but if it is, that it might be nice to actually have established some things in this universe with a Batman movie before it actually happens. I would say it could be great, and yeah, old man Michael Keaton as old Bruce Wayne would be as epic of a casting as is possible. And what I'd actually like to see is basically the initial origin story of Batman Beyond, which is, Terry McGinnis is just a kid who stumbles across Batman, and we see that Batman is still trying to put up the fight, but just can't do it anymore with his suit. And with this suit that enhances his abilities and enhances his power level and things like that, but isn't a gigantic mech suit like it was in Batman versus Superman. Yeah, the fact that it's a different universe, kind of, in terms of Gotham is a completely different. It's a futuristic technological city, but it still has that kind of grittiness that Gotham is expected to have. I mean, I always thought about future Gotham City and Batman Beyond as kind of Blade Runner-esque, which is probably part of the influence that they had for that. But yeah, you make it look futuristic, but you look a future that's never cleaned, is kind of the idea behind that whole universe. But yeah, it could be great. I mean, that you do have this really cool rogues gallery. You have the idea of his father was killed by, I believe, the Joker's gang, and then you realize it's actually part of some conspiracy plot because of the work that he was doing. It's been a long time since I've watched Batman Beyond, but yeah, I think that it could work. It's just a question of, do we want yet another Batman in film, and do we want a situation where we're kind of confusing audiences as to these various different, I guess we kind of referred to them as Elseworlds style stories. If even, like I said, even if it's not going to be an Elseworlds style story, then we have to have some stuff established first. So I think it could work. It's Batman, so it definitely helps that it's Batman. And it could show you that there is some. It could also show people that yes, someone else can be Batman other than Bruce Wayne. I think that's what it could actually establish. So. So for me, I've really been trying to think about this, and I know that we said that we weren't necessarily going to say films that have kind of been confirmed. So you can call me out on it if you want, but I mean, at this point, should I have the Batman on my wish list? I mean, are we concerned enough about the weird myriad issues that are going on with regards to the Batman that I should have this on my wish list as a movie that I sure hope happens? I
I
mean,
don't know. It's obviously Batman is always going to be one of WB's top priorities, and it's going to happen with Matt Reeves. The question really is, if it's Affleck, if it's coming before or after Flashpoint. But I can see why you'd put it on your list. We also don't know the projected release date, and if anyone's going to say, "Hey, you guys are putting a lot of Batman on here," especially you, Eric, I'm just going to say my brief reasoning for that is because aside from the Schumacher movies, kind of broadening it with sidekicks, we haven't. Everything's pretty much just been Bruce Wayne. How many stories can we tell with Bruce Wayne as Batman and the status quo? What what I'm getting at, what you probably noticed, is I want to broaden it with other characters, with the Bat family, with Batman Beyond. It's still Batman, but telling much different stories. And I think phrasing it like that, people will know what I mean. And that's what I want to see. There's so much stuff in the comics that has not made its way to live action. But what else did you have to say about the Batman?
well, I mean, I think that there are some concerns from people who don't have their ears much to the ground, but all they hear is this kind of the chaos that's going on around this movie. I understand why, and as far as me actually hoping that this movie is going to happen, I mean the only other non-confirmed movie, I mean I would definitely put Shazam on the list, or I would maybe say Green Lantern Corps because I'd really like to see a really great Green Lantern movie, and we unfortunately just haven't really got one yet. And I just think that the tone that they took in the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern film just didn't get it done. They really kind of made him a poof as well. I mean, stop making him a fucking crybaby. No, you make him a man's man. You make him, cock of the walk. You make him fearless. You don't play on this idea of, I don't know if I can get over the fact that my daddy died in front of me. No, you make him a man's man. I mean, this guy is driving, the guy's a test pilot, for God's sakes. You make him a man's man. You make him a space cop. I'm hoping that we get not only a Green Lantern Corps movie, but a Shazam movie. But as far as movies that seem like it's what in God's name is happening with him right now, I have to put Batman on the Batman on the list. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love Batman, but it does make sense. Like Eric said, Batman's always been one of Warner Brothers' darlings. He's always been a huge moneymaker for them. It seems like it's a no-brainer that this movie is, of course, going to be made. It's just, my God, oh my God, what is happening with this movie? What is going to actually be the final fruition of this? I mean, if you just look up the Wikipedia for the DCEU, I mean, just a small little segment to Batman, the Batman movie is one of the longer ones simply because it's, well, this happened and then this happened and then this happened and then this happened and then there was a rewrite and then this person and then Affleck supposedly stepped down as director and then supposedly he wasn't going to, and then you throw in rumor mongering on top of that, and it's, is Affleck going to be in the movie? And all of that stuff throws into contention whether or not this movie will actually ultimately get made, at least in any type of fashion that we expect it to be made. So yeah, that's going to be my final one on the wish list. I hope that this movie not only gets made, but gets made well. I honestly, I mean, I still to this day, I don't think that we've got the definitive Batman film in live action. I know that some people will say, oh, The Dark Knight was the best movie. Yes, but he wasn't the Batman from the comic books. And neither was the 1989 Batman films. Those I want to see I want to see basically the Batman that we got in Batman versus Superman, less Frank Miller, more classic Arkham Asylum style. You know,
Yeah, a Batman that doesn't surpass Arnold's body count in Total Recall, basically.
well, I mean, you know, I can't even say that. I can't even say that I've got an issue. I take issue with his quote unquote body count. I mean, obviously that's a thing that we didn't particularly care for in Batman versus Superman. But yeah, at the same time, I mean, it's one of those things where I honestly don't know if that's something that fanboys need to get over. I really don't, because no one gives a shit if Hawkeye or Thor or I'm sorry, not Hawkeye, or Captain America or Tony Stark, if they kill bad guys. Nobody cares. I mean, it makes sense that Batman would kill someone. Now, does it make as much sense for Superman, who has nearly unlimited power, to necessarily kill someone if he can avoid it? No, but if it's an absolute last resort, I mean, again, we don't like it. I get that, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, how do you convincingly have Batman, you know, take on guys in a tank, not get murdered, and simultaneously take out the threat in a believable way without maybe just, you know, blowing it the fuck up? I don't really know. I don't really know that's a good way to put my kind of, you know, my thoughts on it, um, but yeah, give us the character from Arkham Asylum. Give us Arkham Asylum in live action, kind of like that warehouse fight throughout the entire film. Yeah, you want to make it a gritty detective story? Great. Awesome. I'm down with that. Let's see it. And then when he jumps into the fray and he can no longer stand the shadows, I want every fight scene to look like that warehouse fight scene. Every single one of them. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So Eric, you've kind of touched in on your thoughts on.
I got a few. I'll just say a few things about the Batman before we wrap up. And yeah, basically, the Arkham games, I think, probably gave us the best Batman of anything. Those were just phenomenal. But yeah, I'll just say that Josh's concerns or anyone else's about the Batman are warranted, because there's the head in the sand fanboys who, you know, as we say, have to pull up a meme to support every argument, which, you know, I can't stand. If everything was fine with the Batman, we wouldn't be reading something on it every week. If everything was fine, Ben Affleck would still be directing a script that Warner Brothers was in love with, and it would have started filming a few months ago, as Joe Manganiello and Jeremy Irons said it would. None of that happened. So we've got Matt Reeves directing a page one rewrite with Affleck uncertain. And yes, Affleck says, I will keep doing Batman as long as they want. They, being WB, the decision is ultimately not up to him. Kilmer and Clooney both signed 3-picture deals. How many movies were they in? So just keep an open mind and know this is Hollywood, baby. Not everything works out the way you want it to. So before we wrap, I did say I have an honorable mention, a character, Darkseid. Needs to happen. Smallville did him as best they could on a budget. But if you're saying, yeah, he's going to be in Justice League Part 2, no. They said a while back, it's not a two-parter anymore. Zack Snyder is now directing one film, which, by the way, honestly, I think he would have gotten muscled out of if not for the unfortunate passing of his daughter. I think they brought in Joss Whedon for multiple reasons. But yeah, there's a reason it's not called Justice League Part 1 anymore. And Incredible Chatter is saying they've reshot the ending to remove the Darkseid cameo, and they're playing up this threat of Steppenwolf, that Steppenwolf is the threat, not a subordinate, not a vanguard. He's the threat. So if that happens, I can understand it from a filmmaking standpoint. You know, we're going to have this Justice League big bad. We're going to shoot the movie's ending. That's where it's ending. We're going to go forward with these other solo movies. If Justice League proves to be a hit, we'll do a sequel. But as we keep saying, if you do Darkseid and the Forces of Apocalypse, it's the same movie over again. But maybe this time the heroes visit Apocalypse instead of them invading. There are other stories you can tell. But to not have Darkseid in live action, I will pitch a fit. This is a character I absolutely want to see. He's one of my favorite villains next to the Joker. Maybe put him in Man of Steel too. There's a reason why I didn't mention him earlier alongside Brainiac, because I was saving this. But yeah, you do fall into the trapping that, hey, it took the whole team to defeat Steppenwolf and only Superman needs to defeat Darkseid. But it's in keeping with the comics. Superman is taken on Darkseid by himself, but again, this is a character we need in the DCEU, and I'll be remiss if he's not included. So, any final thoughts, Josh? Man, I can't even talk today. I need lunch. Before we close it out.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, yeah, we both want to see Darkseid. I think that anyone, I mean, if there's one thing that can be said, even about Marvel fanboys, people who don't care for the DCEU or DC even as a whole, one of the characters that seems to be universally loved, especially as a villain, there are two really: the Joker and Darkseid, as far as, you know, ultimate villains. And I think that that is a character that, you know, most certainly needs to eventually and inevitably get, you know, his own movie cameo, or not, I'm sorry, not movie cameo, but a movie proper, as far as him being the big bad. I will be disappointed if they ultimately go with the idea of Steppenwolf being the subordinate, or I'm sorry, Steppenwolf not being the subordinate, and literally only being the big bad primary. It will be disappointing, and one of the reasons that obviously it's disappointing is we want to see I mean, you know, Thanos is literally basically stolen from the idea of what Darkseid is, and by all means, DC fans want to get a Thanos level big bad on our side of the aisle as well. It's sad to see Marvel develop this character over a period of time and ultimately deliver, and then to have what essentially is one of the best DC villains kind of stolen away from us is a little upsetting. But I do hope that we get Darkseid in the film, obviously. But we'll tell you what, Eric, we have ran quite a bit over the hour. Why don't you wrap us up, give the links, and we'll close it out. Thanks for listening to the show, guys, and I'll let Eric close us out.
Well, yeah, it's been a good show. We certainly talked about more than we expected. Might end up being one of our longer episodes for running time, but we hope to come back, you know, sometime in September for a new episode. And like we said before, not set in stone, but some of our goals over the next few months are perhaps a Wonder Woman Blu-ray review, maybe a Riverdale season 2 review if our friend Stevie has the time to come back on. And we will definitely be reviewing Justice League in November, though, so you can look forward to that. As for our links for all news pertaining to DC throughout all forms of media, please visit dccomicsnews.com. For our backlog of podcasts and other miscellanea, visit our blog site at multiverseentertainment.wordpress.com. For all your entertainment needs, although it's not affiliated with this podcast, please visit wegotThiscovered.com. Also, check out our friends over at culturejunkies.net and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/apodcast for all seasons. So until next time, thanks for listening and goodbye.
Yep, thanks for listening, guys. Have a good one.